It was a clear day in the city of Phoenix, Arizona, and Jack had just finished his morning coffee when the ground began to shake. At first, he thought it was an earthquake, but the rumbling quickly grew in intensity until the entire building was shaking. Jack looked out of his window and saw a bright flash in the distance, followed by a mushroom cloud rising up into the sky. It was a nuclear explosion. Jack's mind raced as he tried to process what had just happened. He knew that Phoenix was a prime target for a nuclear attack, given the presence of military bases and government facilities in the area, but he never thought it would actually happen. The radio crackled to life, and a voice announced that the attack had been carried out by a hostile foreign power. The news was grim. Phoenix was just the first city to be hit, and there were reports of multiple strikes across the country. Jack's thoughts turned to his family. His wife and children were across town at their home, and he knew he had to reach them as quickly as possible. He grabbed his bag and headed out into the street, which was already starting to fill with panicked people. The city was in chaos. Cars were overturned, buildings were on fire, and people were running in all directions. Jack could see military vehicles in the distance, and he knew that the government would be mobilizing to respond to the attack. As he made his way through the streets, he saw firsthand the devastation that the blast had caused. Entire buildings had been reduced to rubble, and there were bodies lying in the streets. The smell of smoke and burning flesh filled the air. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Jack reached his home. It was still standing, but there was damage to the roof and walls. He found his family huddled together in the basement, scared and shaken but unharmed. Jack knew that they had to leave the city as soon as possible. He loaded up his car with supplies and they set out on the road, along with countless others who were fleeing the city. The highways were clogged with traffic, and the radio was filled with reports of more attacks across the country. As they drove, Jack thought about what the world would be like after the nuclear war. Would there even be a world left to rebuild? He felt a sense of despair and hopelessness wash over him. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. The family traveled from town to town, always on the move, always looking for safety. They encountered other survivors, some friendly and some hostile. They faced hunger, thirst, and illness, but somehow they managed to survive. As the world slowly began to recover from the nuclear apocalypse, the family settled into their new life in the small town. It wasn't too long before they noticed strange things happening in the world around them. Plants and animals had begun to mutate, taking on bizarre new forms that no one had ever seen before. Some of the trees grew twisted and gnarled branches, while others sprouted massive blooms that could swallow a human whole. The animals were even more frightening, with some growing extra limbs or developing strange, otherworldly abilities. At first, the townspeople were terrified of these mutant creatures. They avoided them at all costs, never venturing too far from the safety of their homes. But eventually, curiosity got the better of them, and people began to venture out into the wilderness to study these strange new beings. It wasn't too long before they discovered that the mutants were not all dangerous. In fact, some of them were quite helpful to the townspeople. A group of scientists found that certain plants had developed the ability to purify the air, while others could filter toxins from the water. Some animals even became domesticated, with families adopting mutant cats and dogs as pets. Of course, not all of the mutants were friendly. There were reports of creatures that could shoot fire from their eyes or control the minds of humans with a single glance. The town had to set up a system of defenses to protect against these dangerous mutants, and everyone learned to stay on high alert. As time passed, the mutants became a part of everyday life in the small town. The townspeople adapted to their new world, and learned to live alongside the bizarre creatures that had come to call the area home. But the family never forgot the horrors of the nuclear apocalypse, and the terrifying reality that their world could be changed forever at any moment.